an immense pleasure and honor for me to welcome today Mr. Alan Greenberg. Now, Alan has amazing accomplishments to his name, and to name a few, he is currently the Senior External Advisor to McKinsey and Company on Health Tech in Education, a venture partner at EDT Partnership, Educator Sector Consultancy, also globally associated with multiple regions like Madrid, London, Singapore, Mexico, and China. He's also a trust architect at Immutable Insight, which is a blockchain fund in Germany. Previously, he's been the director for Apple Education at EMEA. And I've been telling Alan that if I continue bringing in his accomplishments, this interview will pretty much go on for longer. So Alan, thank you so much. It's an honor to have you. Welcome on the show.
Thank you. You're very kind and you're very generous. I mean, I think that the fact I've had lots of jobs is not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. We'll find out.
Well, we'll know. Well, we have a lot to learn from you today, and we're very excited about it. I am completely excited to know more about your work insights that you can bring in today to our audience. I want to start today by speaking about value. How can an organization derive maximum value for their stakeholders from digital transformation initiatives? What is your take on that?
I mean, that is a half-hour conversation in its own right. But I mean, I'll give you some headings. First of all, I think that impact sits very high on the list. I mean, if you're not driving impact, if you're not able to engage and drive some sustainability and to drive some real value for the people you're reaching out to, for ultimately the clients, I think it's a key component. My perspective on this is that I think that we need to look at the world we live in today in a post-COVID environment. The world has moved considerably over the last 18 months to what I would describe as a B2B2C marketplace. And what I mean by that is that if you talk to most technology companies, they will always tell you that they're satisfying their consumers, but actually things have changed considerably. If you consider that we have distributed networks in schools with homeschooling, if you consider we have distributed networks in universities and colleges with remote learning, if you consider that many of us have not yet returned to our offices, we have distributed networks in enterprise. So in that distributed environment, we need to have a different mindset and a different requirement in terms of satisfying the consumer. And although a lot of companies think they do this, it's something that needs to be looked at very seriously and is a key component. So when I say impact, it's impact on the individual and the ability to drive personal learning initiatives, personal learning outcomes, personal learning journeys.
Very well said. And I think a lot of that impact also brings me now to innovation and ability to innovate. What makes some companies stand out in their ability to innovate and deliver breakthrough products and services? What do you think?
Well, again, that's a huge question. I mean, I had the privilege to work with Apple, and one of the characteristics of Apple is how intuitive their technology is. I mean, the point is, if you consider how a 3-year-old reads and consider how an 83-year-old reads, they read like this. In other words, the ability to scroll. So you don't need a command of technology to use some of those devices. And I think that's a key component of getting technology out of the way, and allowing people the insights into what they need and the assets they need, the assets they want to use. Certainly, personalization is key. So the ability to drive relevance, the ability to drive engagement for the individual. I mean, it's all about bring me the internet that's relevant to me, just don't bring me the internet. None of us have the time or the imagination or the scope to adopt everything. So driving that relevance argument, driving context is a key component, and data and AI plays a huge part of how that comes about.
Do you think research in particular area might be really important when you're talking about a younger and an older age group? It is so important to know how they individually work, right?
Well, you ask a very good question, but there's not a simple answer to that. One of the challenges I have, and I've done a research paper with some colleagues of mine in Zurich, which is looking at a personal learning journey. And if you think about it, we tend to talk about schools, colleges, universities, enterprise. We tend to segment it, kindergarten, we tend to segment it into age groups, and we tend to segment learning into a structure which the institutions find comfortable. But there is something interesting here, which is there's one consistent, and that's you, the individual, as a learner, from kindergarten to primary school, to secondary school, to university, to enterprise. You are consistent. So what you need to look at is how you take that learning journey with you. Learning journey is different. I mean, can I give you an example?
Sure.
My son went to Cambridge, got a double first. He went to Oxford, got a master's distinction. He's now a barrister earning copious amounts of money. His learning journey was a straight line. His father, unfortunately, is not so clever as his son, and he needs to read things 6 times. It takes him 6 times longer. It doesn't mean I don't reach the same value as he does, but my journey is completely different. So you have to look at the individual journey of that person. You have to look at their learning profiles. You have to look at how they engage with learning items and really tailor that learning to them, not just put a dictate in place that this is the process and you have to engage with it.
Amazing, amazing. That is so insightful. Well, that brings me to data. Now, I want to know your thoughts about the necessity for qualitative and quantitative data and even AI. Why do you think intuitive disciplines in technology drive consumer engagement?
Well, it is the question of qualitative and quantitative data. In other words, if you look behind the data, there is one term which is becoming increasingly prevalent in the education sector, in fact, in every sector, and that is the issue of trust. Now, trust is a very easy word to say and to use, but it's not a very easy thing to deliver against. But I mean, if you go to a doctor, you want to know that doctor is a specialist in the subject you're talking to him or her about. If you're going to your bank manager, you want to know that he or she is going to look after your money and look after your wealth if you have wealth to look after. So the trust coefficient is a key component. And I would argue in the world we live in today with social media, with a lot of technology companies and their impact in terms of engagement, whether that trust coefficient is necessarily fundamental to the learning process. I would argue that that's a sensitive subject. And if you look at what's going on globally, a lot of the big tech companies are being challenged by governments now because of the power they wield. Do you trust Google? I mean, Google is an advertising company as far as I'm concerned, which is great if you want to advertise your t-shirts or your products. I'm not convinced it's the greatest environment for education. So the trust coefficient is key. Quality and quantitative data is key. And building the data sets and driving what I refer to as contextual learning. So driving learning, which is not learning by a Google search, but actually learning by subject matter and context of the subject that's of interest to me, and driving that relevance argument. That for me is the key component of what the data key component of the data element of this.
And also data is evolving, right? Like what might be relevant today, it will change 2 years from now. And that must be challenging for a lot of tech companies to keep innovating and catch up with time. How difficult must that be?
No, I don't agree. I don't think it's challenging at all. I think it's a way of building a company. I mean, the point is, you know, there's many examples, but companies are not rigid. It's not a case of, I mean, if you take Apple, for example, Apple iterates all the time. Now, it iterates for commercial reasons, but it also iterates because there's innovation. Innovation doesn't stop. Innovation is going on every minute, every second, every day, every week, every month. So the point is, you have to build for building engagement, building sustainability. You have to build in an iterative way that allows things to change and evolve. And there is no definitive fixed position on any of these subjects. So it's a matter of understanding the challenges in front of you and building an ecosystem and an environment that meets those challenges.
Right. Amazing. You know, Alan, we've spoken about relevance a while back. I want to bring your attention to localization. I want to know your thoughts about it. Why are localization, culture, and relevance even the key drivers to success globally today?
Well, I can share a story with you, which might get me into lots of trouble. I'm sure
Please
you're all like that. But I don't often talk about Apple. But in this particular case, I'm sure my colleagues at Apple won't mind. But when Apple Apple is an American company, and when it brings its innovation on a global basis, there was an assumption, if you like, in the US that bringing an American website to an English environment was the right thing to do. And I think I can share with you, there were some very robust conversations about whether that was right or wrong. And we would argue, actually, the website is an American and we need it in English. And again, our American cousins perhaps didn't recognize what we were saying. I mean, it's obvious you translate it to French or German or Chinese or Spanish, that's obvious, but translating it to English, but no, you need to, and you need to be mindful of the local culture. In other words, what might be relevant in the United Kingdom may not be relevant in the Middle East, for example. Certainly when it comes to India, understanding Indian culture, and India has many cultures, but understanding Indian cultures. So the localization argument is a key component of how you make education content relevant on a global basis. And it is a very important component of the engagement. And localization isn't just about language, it's about culture, it's about mindset. It can even be about the imagery that one uses in terms of how you present your products and present your philosophy to your clients and to your engagement.
Absolutely, well said. So again, a lot of background research there that tech companies need to indulge into, and I'm sure brands do a lot of that work before they launch themselves into a region, because, like you said, a US could be so far different from what a Middle East imagery would look like. So it's completely true.
But I think there's a challenge, is that, how do I put it, is that, you know, we live in our centers. I mean, I'm privileged to work on a global basis. I have relationships with companies literally all over the world, which I would point out to you, I'm 23 years of age, I just look like this, and that's because I don't get any sleep. But leaving that aside, understanding a global environment, understanding the culture. I had the privilege when I was at Apple of working in China for 2.5 years. It was an amazing insight, because whatever perceptions I had of China, it was very different actually living there and being part of that community. I've had the privilege to work and engage in India, and India is an extraordinary place to work. And the influences of different regions and the influences of different cultures, it is a key component. And again, I would encourage anybody building certainly educational or health technologies to be mindful of those different localizations, cultures, the fit to market, understanding diversity within that argument too. It's a very, very important component.
It is interesting to know you were in India. What were your thoughts and what were you working on when you took the visit?
Well, I was working with a stem cell company, and I was involved with developing some relationships both in Thailand and in India. I would point out that my knowledge of India is restricted to Delhi, and it's restricted to 5-star hotels and some very fine dining. And I'm sure there's a greater experience to be shared in India, which I look forward to. I would also point out to you, I've had the privilege of being invited into Indian homes, and I have some very good friends who might listen to this interview, and I will not mention them by name, but your hospitality is second to none. I just need to control my alcohol intake to make sure I don't overdo that. Let's leave that for a separate subject, shall we?
Amazing. I completely agree with you. We really reign the rule when it comes to hospitality. I agree. Coming back to the technology, what upcoming technologies do you feel are going to really disrupt consumer behavior in the coming organizations and in the coming years?
Okay, again, a deep subject. If I pick two things which I think are already influential and will become increasingly critical, I would say that voice technology is a game changer. I'm not talking about Siri and Alexa now, but I'm talking about the ability to search contextually through voice. If I give you an example, there's a company called Merlin Minds, which has recently launched. It's actually been 2.5 years in development in the US, built by a friend of mine, Sachin Mitra, who was part of IBM Watson. But he's bringing voice technology to the classroom. So he's taking away the intimidation that teachers have with digitally native students sitting in front of them. Yet the teacher now has the ability to talk to the internet, to ask a question, and for the internet to drive contextual search, which brings them reference to that. I think that is a key breakthrough technology from a classroom point of view. I think voice generally will be increasingly important in our lives, the ability to talk and communicate and to be able to interact. I mean, to be able to talk in one language and listen in another is something we can already do today. So I think voice is a key breakthrough technology, which is still evolving. The other thing that I spend a lot of time on is around blockchain. And I'm not talking about crypto now, I'm talking about the ability to drive blockchain services. So digital asset management, digital rights management, digital identity is key, where the individual owns their own identity and has a digital wallet which contains their learning resources. Why do we need to trust schools and universities to basically provide us with their resources? Why do we not have our own wallet? In the concept, we keep our credit cards and we keep our cash in a wallet, why can't we keep our learning resources in that wallet and take it with us, and then choose to share that through our digital identity with people we wish to collaborate with, people we want to build research projects with. So I think blockchain is a key facilitator of innovation. It's the next internet, if you like. It's the next way that we will actually move forward in our education resources. And again, although it's quite early, there's a lot of innovation going on, and I'm very privileged to be part of some of that innovation and some of that research.
Amazing, amazing, Alan. Alan, we're going to wind up soon, but before that, I do want to know of any amazing story that you'd want to share about an innovation or a breakthrough that you've been part of. I mean, you've had an amazing journey so far, and I'd love to know maybe something that still stays with you, something that you're really, really proud of.
Well, there's lots of things I'm not proud of. I mean, again, in terms of errors, I think one of the advantages is making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. So I qualify as an expert in making mistakes and trying to get them right. But one brief anecdotal story I will share with you, which is fun, is we talked a little earlier about scale. When there's innovation going on, you don't necessarily know what that's going to lead to. I mean, I'll give you an example. My team at Apple built podcasting, that was built with University of Lyon and HEC Business School. And when we first built it, it wasn't particularly popular within the Apple team in terms of the fact that it didn't drive any revenue. And driving revenue is what you get recognized when you work for an enterprise organization. But I was privileged to drive the podcasting team and the evolution there. And I can remember being on a stage in a workshop in Apple in probably 2005, 2006. And I was talking about the fact that we had 2,500 downloads this month on podcasting and got a round of applause from 12 academics who were sitting in the room having to listen to me. I'm trying to think when it was, about 3.5 years ago, I was invited back to Cupertino, and I shared a conversation with one of my colleagues who was with me in London and then moved back to Cupertino. And he shared with me that the project that we built in 2006, 2007, 3 years ago, had over 10 billion downloads. Now that
wow.
Well, exactly. That figure's not in the public domain, but I listened to this and I said, well, 10 billion, that sounds like an awful lot of numbers, but I had no idea how many zeros there were in 10 billion. So I left the meeting and I went to Wikipedia and I asked Wikipedia, how many zeros are there in 10 billion, and found out there were 10. I then got a piece of paper and wrote that number down. But when you write the number down, it's a very long number. And the point I'm trying to make is that there is no way any of us had any concept that what we were building, what we were working on, the collaboration with HEC, with the University of Lyon, was going to lead to something of this scale, which touches almost every human being who has a digital device. They would know what a podcast is. And that was built, as I say, in that period. But when you write down that number and see the scale of it, that is truly humbling. I mean, again, I'm happy to take credit for it, but I don't think anybody had any idea of what we were doing. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Amazing. My God, that is so inspiring, Alan. And like you said, you're so right.
Well, I'll probably get sued now by Apple for disclosing confidential information. So as long as Speaking can support me in that lawsuit, I'd be very grateful. But the point I'm trying to make is that, we work with some very innovative companies. This conversation is part of an innovative company, helping them understand what's possible, helping them understand the aspiration they have. And again, success is not guaranteed, but the opportunity to drive success, to drive engagement, to drive sustainability is there for us all. And I'm very pleased and happy to be part of that journey.
Beautiful. And we are so happy to be a part of your journey. Like you rightly said, when we are on a path to innovation, we don't know where you're going to land up, what you're going to create. Like you said, it could be a failure, but it also could be a success. And it's on to us and how we take those lessons and really build it towards success. Alan, this is so inspiring. Thank you so much for chatting with us today. It has been an absolute honor to know more from you. Thank you so much.
It's my privilege. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.